Welcome to join me in this rather informal, spontaneous, freewheeling reflection on the meaning of heroism in life. Obviously, the context in which I undertake this reflection is the Ukraine war, but also the tragedy that is still unfolding in the northeastern state of Manipur, where tens and thousands of people live traumatized in the midst of organized atrocities to which often the law enforcement agencies are partisan. I also have in mind the various elements of heroism that we take for granted in our day-to-day life, without which we don't realize life would be very colorless, very dull and drab. So I thought it would be worthwhile for us to become a little more aware of some of these aspects that we tend to neglect or forget or overlook. And first of all, let me state why this happens. Why do we overlook the very precious, extremely valuable element of heroism that's an integral part of our life, which makes life worth living? It's because of our tendency to live life piecemeal or to compartmentalize life. For us, we have special slots for heroism or special theaters of heroism, and the general run of life is imagined in terms of routine with which we associate only drudgery and boredom. But the exciting thing I want to share with you through this reflection together is that life can be heroic. In fact, life needs to be heroic. We need to imagine life not merely as a routine, but also as an adventure. By the way, how we live depends on what kind of idea about life we entertain. Most people tend to borrow their ideas about what normal life is or what indeed life is from the prevailing notions in their environments. If they live in a society where life is imagined only in terms of the routinized activities, then they tend to think that the element of heroism is extraneous to life. But suppose you are living in a context of warfare. I happened to have an experience like that in 1971 when I went to Delhi to do my postgraduate studies in the University of Delhi. All of a sudden, the India-Pakistan war broke out, and that was a time India tried East Pakistan to be liberated. India helped East Pakistan to be liberated and to be formed into the present Bangladesh. For about a fortnight, the war raged. Delhi was under curfew. And I remember at that time, there was the movement of soldiers moving to the frontier. And we used to go and join volunteers at New Delhi railway station, merely offering tea to these jawans. Huge cans and cans and cans of teas used to be made and brought to the station, and our job was merely to run around and distribute cups, earthen cups, matka as it is called, to soldiers. And one did it without any sense of exhaustion or tiredness. One never expected any reward. In fact, one felt very exhilarated at being able to serve these jawans who were going to risk their life for the sake of the country. So what I was serving at that time, as I now realize, is not just a person. I was merely paying my tribute, or I was expressing my respect for the element of heroism in life. That's how I understand that particular situation. At the present time, though, that was not how I understood it at that time. So Now let's think of another situation. You think of a woman, she gets married and she knows she's going to be a mother in good time. And she also knows that childbirth is not an easy thing to endure, and many women die in child labor. And yet, no woman holds back from this sacred duty of mothering life. No woman offers the alibi that, it's too risky to conceive and give birth to children, therefore don't expect me to go through this. I doubt if men have comparable heroism, but we take this for granted. No society respects a woman's heroism in giving birth to children, though she undergoes life and death struggle in the process. Now, I've often wondered why it is that we sing and recognize and reward heroism in the battlefield, the heroism of killing others, whereas we completely gloss over the heroism of women who undergo extreme pain and risk in giving birth to new life. Is it because we appreciate or we respect the capacity to kill rather than the capacity to give birth to a new life? What is it? I don't know if we really think about it. Think of, the familiar story of Father Damien, who went to a colony of lepers to serve them, knowing full well that he incurred the risk of becoming a leper, which indeed he became, because he did this work at a time when there was no effective treatment for leprosy. I had an experience very vaguely similar to this. In 1991-92, I was producing a documentary on HIV/AIDS. At that time, the dread about HIV/AIDS was so high, so irrationally high, that if a person was known to be known to be infected with the HIV, human immunodeficiency virus, he was not only ostracized from the society, in fact, there was a risk of his house being attacked, or if it's a hut, the hut being burned down. Sorry. In order to produce this documentary film, I had to do location shooting in various places, and one such location was Ramnath, Ramnath, yes, in Tamil Nadu, a village in Ramnath in Tamil Nadu. Another location was, by the way, Churachandpur in Manipur, which is now very much in the news. Third location was Pune, then Kamatipura, so on and so forth. Now, while I was doing this location shooting in a house in this place called Ramnath in Tamil Nadu, I was there from morning till evening because location shooting takes a lot of time, as you would know. And the person who was infected was a very young engineer. And it's a very sad story, really. And he had a 4-year-old daughter, and his wife was also very young, a very distinguished looking lady. The lady came up to me and asked, "Sir, would you have some tea with us?" Now, I was suddenly taken aback because that was something I never expected, because as per the notions available then, there was a slight risk of getting infected. Now, that was not scientific at all. In fact, the scientific information available even at that time was that it was very safe to socially interact with people. No one got infected because one had a cup of tea from the house of a person infected with the virus, so on and so forth. But scientific knowledge is one thing, and the subjective feeling about what's likely to happen, especially because of the association between sex and death and the non-availability of either a vaccine or a therapeutic drug, all this contributed to this very irresistible, unmanageable fear. Now, it took me a while to compose myself, and finally I said, yes, I would. And I tell you, that's not a small thing. If you know the context and where you are and what's the risk you are incurring, though at that point in time, scientifically, you are incurring no risk at all. Subjectively, you are incurring a huge risk. So a certain, and why I'm making a mention of this is that after I said yes and after I shared a cup of tea with them, I experienced a tremendous sense of triumph. And that triumph relates to this element of heroism in day-to-day life. Now, let me now conclude this discussion by taking up a very, very common aspect. Think of a situation in which you have to make a choice between two options. One, an easy option, and the other, a more difficult, more challenging option. One, a safe option, and the other, a risky option. What will you choose? 99% of the people in the world will choose the safe option, the easy option. A handful of people would choose the more demanding, challenging, and risky option. That's why I'm saying that the capacity for heroism exists in us, but because we are conditioned to think of life in terms of safe options, most of us suppress our instinct for heroism and we choose safer options, in the process shutting ourselves out of the more exciting aspects of life. And the consequence of that is we look around for people who are living more adventurous lives in order to idolize them or in order to share vicariously their sense of adventure. We cannot live our life adventurously, but we would like to be connected somehow to those who are living adventurously. Now, this shows actually the poverty of our life. I only can bear witness to you from my personal experience. Whenever I have taken the more difficult route, the riskier of the two options, the more demanding of the two avenues, the end product has been far more exciting than it would have been otherwise. Too many people disown the truth simply because they do not want to see life as an adventure. They do not want to incur the slightest risks or inconvenience. As a result, what happens is that they impoverish their personality, they cheapen themselves, and all the while they're aware of the fact inwardly that they are cheapening themselves and they often curse themselves, but it then becomes a habit, and habit exercises its tyranny over people, and after a while they find it difficult to break out of it. Even if inwardly they long very strongly to move on to the heroic zone, they find it impossible to break out of the shackles which they had invited upon themselves. So the long and short of what I have said so far is that we must think of life not merely in terms of routine activities which only breed boredom. I'm not saying that routine activities can be dispensed with. I'm only saying that if life is imagined only in terms of routine activities, then those very activities which are very essential to sustain life becomes very boring. That's why most people experience the burden of drudgery in life, and you can see that writ large on their faces. On the other hand, if life is also enlivened with the element of heroism, which everybody is capable of. There is not a single human being upon this earth who is not capable of heroism. Let me only recount a personal experience and I shall close this reflection. The story was narrated to me from my very early days in this world when I was a little infant, a baby in a cradle. We lived in a very small house. The cradle in which I was very close to the window. And in those days, snakes were very, very common. In fact, I've seen snakes on the rafters of the roof and things like that. And once a snake fell on my body, so it was very common. Now, at that time, when I was a little infant and I was in the cradle sleeping, I was near the window and the window was open, and suddenly my mother noticed something, some movement. And on second look, she realized it was a fairly big snake. And between my cradle and the snake, there was very little distance. What did my mother do? Most men would run away screaming. What did my mother do? She had extreme presence of mind. She simply forcibly shut the door of the window and crushed the serpent. Now, in doing so, she risked her life. She could have been stung by the snake. She could have died. But that's the element of heroism. So if today I'm sharing these thoughts with you, my dear friends, it's because of the heroism of a woman. That's why I'm saying that we must think of life also in terms of heroism. And life without the spirit of heroism is dull and drab. And there's no reason why it should be so. Thank you.